Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm recording. It's cool.
See, my thing is, it should ask you what you had done, but what you had done because you're the only one who could do that. If I go to somebody else,
I think you just flipped a switch on my account in there and granted me permission. I'll just let it roll and then I'll just distribute it to the ones paid.
do you see that?
Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm recording. It's cool.
See, my thing is, it should ask you what you had done, but what you had done because you're the only one who could do that. If I go to somebody else,
I think you just flipped a switch on my account in there and granted me permission. I'll just let it roll and then I'll just distribute it to the ones paid up. That sound cool?
it sounds like a plan.
Okay. Awesome.
Or hold on a second, I could do it to Karen. I think I could do it to Karen.
Do I gotta ask first?
Adam, I'm allowing you to.
Okay, got it. Okay. Huh.
See, now I allowed you to. I don't know what you guys did, but now there's people that I can't do it with.
Oh, that's cool. We'll take-
John.
It's allowed to record now too.
Say that again.
This is Adam. It's allowed me to record when you flip me over.
Awesome.
It says I need to ask for permission.
Who is this that's asking?
Sybil, okay, we're good to go. Thank you.
Awesome.
Nah, I'm still trying to figure out how I could do it.
Okay.
Did you got? Was there a button that you pushed to ask to record?
The record button when that little bar comes up. It's on one of the sides of your screen. You know, if you navigate, if you drag your cursor over it, it'll pop up. On the far left, it should
See,
say
I'm
like
on an iPhone
okay.
and an iPad. Well, it's about 12 o'clock right now. 12 o'clock participants. It shows that this is recording on here. It said it's recording, but hold on a second. Anyone? Does everyone see the preamble of the Constitution? Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
You want us to stay
Preamble
on?
of the- If you have any questions, feel free to ask the question or raise your hand or ask the question. I'm not shy about this. Understanding the Constitution is a fundamental concept in which you have to get this. So now it says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Okay. First, you have to understand who's actually ordaining this Constitution. It's we, the people. This is a concept that we actually understand, but we don't look at the full details on where the authority comes from. The authority comes from the actual individual human being who bands together in a locality, such as a state or a city, and then they form a state. A state, then the state forms the United States, and it's formed for our protection. And so when we created the Constitution for this corporation called the United States, they said this is the bylaws for that corporation. We have removed 40-minute time. Just a second. Okay. Now, when understanding the authority comes from the people, then we can move forward to understand how. Just a second. We'll understand how the taxing authority kicks in. The taxing authority first comes from the people. The people authorize the state to use. Oh, wait, hold on. First, I have to go to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The enumeration of powers. Somebody have a question? Ellis, Williams, and CJ. Maximum takeaways from Cincinnati team with pretty bad meetings and substitution. Understand starting with seniors on seniors. Just a second. Where is it? Hello.
Yeah, now, well, few people, few of them home, one leave, two more pull up, the other one come back.
There's somebody, you're not on mute.
Yeah, it got a little chilly to us.
Participant, you're not on mute. No, I got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm on mute now, right?
Take exit 193B.
On this Zoom call with my man Tommy, he finna, start talking about some of this stuff.
I thought I was on mute. I'm on mute, right, Tommy?
No.
No, all right. I'm about to put it on.
Just okay. Just a second. Sorry for the delay. Just had the enumeration. Okay. Everyone see the enumeration of powers? In the Constitution, the people granted Congress, it says Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duty, imposts, excises, and to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. the whole purpose of this is to give the Congress the authority to lay and collect taxes. And once the people, through the Constitution, is the right to do so. Thus, in understanding what rights are actually found on paper and are written. And therefore, we shouldn't deny them their authority and their right to lay and collect taxes. And on the last section of the enumeration of powers, it clearly states that the Congress has the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper to carry in the execution of the foregoing powers, and that's to lay and collect taxes. Based upon the fact that we have allowed Congress the authority to lay and collect taxes, we have to understand, like from the Declaration of Independence, it says that the right of the people to, once a government has become destructive to your pursuit of happiness, it's your right and it's your duty to institute a new government that will lay into effect, that will better suit your best interests. Okay, just a second. Just a second. Is anyone familiar with Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution? Here's two sections, or here's a section in Article 4, Section 1 and 2 of the Constitution is granted to the people to ensure or create a loophole for the Congresses and the United States and the states' taxing authority. And what you have to learn is how to actually implement these two sections, Section 1 and Section 2. It says full faith and credit should be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. I'm going to point that out. It says full faith and credit should be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. What the purpose of this is when one is able to understand what a republic is, a system of government in which the people hold the sovereign power. Well, you have to understand how to exercise the sovereign powers. How would I say? By the state seal, it acts as a scepter. A scepter indicates the sovereign authority or the power. So when the state seal is applied to a document or shown, it shows a sovereign authority. And this is not a bad thing. It's just understanding in a position in which the people exercise sovereign authority. Then you have to go to Section 2, which is the actual loophole from Congress's taxing authority. It says the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of the citizens in the several states. Now, when understanding how the legal system works, I'm pretty sure everyone has heard that, that they're dealing with corporate fictions like corporations. So then when they give you an indictment or a charging instrument or the like. What they're dealing with is actual citizens. Citizens are persons that live and dwell on paper. You grew up your whole life feeling that you were a citizen, or this is something that people were taught. But by definition of what a citizen is, it says a person by either birth or naturalization becomes a member who is a member of a political community and owing allegiance to such community. I might be able to pull that up out of the. I might be able to pull that up out of Black's Law Dictionary. Just a second. It says someone who by either birth or naturalization is a member of a political community, owing allegiance to the community and being entitled to enjoy all of its civil rights and protections, a member of a civil state. While I'm on the Black's Law Dictionary, we start looking at certain words that have to take an effect on how dealing with the system. First definition of a person that we've come to learn and accept as is a human being, right? But the person that's actually dealt with in a courtroom or even in all legal situations whatsoever, it is an entity, such as a corporation that is recognized by law and having most of the rights and duties of a human being. In this sense, the term includes partnerships, other associations, whether incorporated or not, right? When referring to a human being, there's a term called a natural person. And that's why it says a natural person. When dealing with the human being, it's a natural person, right? But then there's the artificial person, which is the person that dealt with in a courtroom. And they're gonna make some, when describing or defining what an artificial person is, it says it's an entity such as a corporation created by law and given certain legal rights and duties of a human being. A being, real or imaginary, who for the purpose of legal reasoning is treated more or less as a human being. An entity is a person for the purpose of due process and equal protection clauses, but is not a citizen for the purposes of the Privileges and Immunity Clause of Article 4, Section 2, and in the 14th Amendment. Okay? And understanding what the Privileges and Immunities Clause is we're going to go back to tax. We'll go to tax so that we can see how there's only one definition for the word tax. It says it's a charge, usually monetary, imposed by the government on persons. Now, once you realize your name in all capital letters or the ens legis, or once you realize that the ens legis is the corporate fiction, your name on a piece of paper, and I'm not here trying to get you to go in here talking about you're not the corporation and stuff, because you guys have a symbiotic relationship with your person, wherein you have to protect your person. And because you have to protect your person is because of it's a part of a trust account that's established for you. So, and you have the ability to pay all his bills. I'm not saying, and I will never say that you don't have to pay your taxes. I'm saying that you do pay your taxes, but learning how to pay your taxes is how you're going to win, and how you could resolve other individuals' tax liability is how you're going to win. It says it's a charge. Usually, it says usually monetary. It doesn't always have to be monetary. It doesn't have to actually come in cash. Imposed by the government on persons, persons, entity, transactions, or property to yield public revenue. So when they tax, what they're doing is they're trying to yield public revenue, and they're going to tax persons, entities, transactions, or property, right? And what it says here, it says, most broadly, the term embraces all governmental impositions on the person, property, privileges, occupations, and enjoyment of the people. Now, if understanding how in law, it's critical to understand that commas are used to denote a clause or a catch in the framework of the sentence. It says, most broadly, the term embraces all governmental impositions on the person, okay, property, privilege, occupation, and enjoyment of the people. So in between each comma, there's in between each comma, it leads up to of the people. What they're saying here is the person of the people, the property of the people, the privileges of the people, the occupation of the people, and enjoyment of the people. And the reason why I'm pointing out the concept, when I point that out, so that you understand that your person in and of itself, like John or Jeff, well, when they put your person on a piece of paper, they're actually laying out a tax on your person. And that the tax isn't on you because you're one of the people. Being one of the people in which all taxing authority come from, based upon the fact that we to act as a governmental entity and collect taxes by all means necessary. Therefore, they tax your person, your property, your privileges, your occupation, and enjoyment. And they go through your person, like your ens legis, your creature of law, and that's how they use it. So now we're going to go back to the concept of what the privilege is. For the privilege, what we'll learn is how this privilege thing works. It says a special legal right, exemption, or immunity granted to a person or class of person, an exception to a duty. A privilege grants someone the legal freedom to do or not do a given act. It immunizes that conduct under ordinary circumstances, which would subject the actor to liability. Now we'll go to immunity. But the key factor on dealing with the privileges, understanding the key word I want you to really understand is the exemption. Because when it's all said and done, what you'll be using is your exemption, because all taxing authority, it comes back to the people, the exemption. So when we start looking at who's subject to the taxation, in the beginning of the Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, the enumeration of power, the people imposed taxing authority on Congress. Understanding that people impose the taxing authority on Congress. Thus, Congress has the tax liability. They have the tax liability, not the people. This is why they created the corporate fiction or the ens legis to pass off the tax liability. or the corporations. So now we'll go to immunity. The word immunity, an exemption from a duty, liability, or service of process, especially such an exemption granted to a public official or governmental unit. We're going back to the keyword exemption. Just a second. Okay. When understanding where the taxing authority comes from, we'll look back at how it starts off at. There's nowhere in the law does it say that the people are to be taxed, because the people are the source in which all taxation comes from. It says, so the people charge the state with the authority, and then what the state does is they go to the United States, and the United States, they tax corporations. Your person is a corporation, right? And then what happens is when everything is said and done, after the United States and the state, they collect taxes, what they do is they find or create a bill in which to return the taxation to the people, such as building your schools, such as building your bridges, such as building your prisons. So these are ways that taxation is created. I mean, it goes back to the people. And then when they accumulate enough revenue or Federal Reserve notes or other mediums of exchange that they've collected out of their ability to lay and collect taxes, then they give the people their tax refund. And then the people sign off on it. Like when you get your tax refund, then you sign off on it so that they can clear up their books. And it goes through the Treasury Department to do this. Okay. Now, when you start understanding the concept of taxation, do you have anything you could offer a corporation, such as your car payments? Well, when you realize that the car dealer, the dealership, they have to pay taxes to the state or the United States because of their charter or their design and their incorporation. When they have to pay taxes, and here you are the recipient from all the taxation, and you realize that the United States and the state have a tax liability to you, and then the corporation has a tax liability to the state or the United States by its incorporation, then you have something that you could offer. You have something you could offer the corporation, and that's your exemption. Understand the science behind your exemption. Your exemption creates a credit on their books, offsetting or defraying their tax liability to the government. And this process is done through registration. This process is done through registration. And it's a key or pivotal point in understanding what registration does. It puts it on public record, allowing all entities to know that where the taxation went. It shows that the United States and the state has done its job. And because the United States and the states, they have a job to collect taxes. And they put it on public record so that everyone knows it, so that they've done a perfect job. In most case scenarios, when they lay and collect taxes, the people are extremely satisfied by it. Because in the end, guess what you get? You get your tax refund. But once their tax collection becomes detrimental to your well-being, or when it becomes detrimental to you or not of your benefit, it is the right of the people to exempt their tax liability. the state and the United States tax liability. So when they go tax McDonald's, I'll use McDonald's for an example. When they tax McDonald's, the state or the United States, then McDonald's, when they tax McDonald's, they have to give you a tax refund. But what if you want to save McDonald's from a burden? You could offer McDonald's your exemption because the United States' duty is to lay and collect taxes. Once you apply your exemption on a medium or a security or an obligation, it will defray their tax liability for the dollar amount necessary to secure whatever reasoning on why the taxation was accumulated. So now, if you exempt McDonald's from their tax liability, now the United States or the state can't tax them because the state and the United States is only taxing for the people. An example: if I come to you and I say, well, you owe Johnny or Joe some money, and I go collect the taxes from you, but I don't give it to Johnny or Joe, who the taxes were belonging to, then I've done a criminal act, because what I've actually done is I stole money from you under the assumption that you're going to give it to Johnny and Joe. So who am I collecting for? Johnny and Joe. If Johnny and Joe says to me, Tommy, you don't have to collect the taxes, then all of a sudden I'm still going to collect the taxes, then I'm completely out of law because I don't have the actual authority to lay and collect taxes. But if I have an agreement with Johnny or Joe to go collect taxes, then I'm doing it under their authority. So now let's say that the United States is collecting taxes, and then you circumvent their tax collection by exempting the liability on that account in which they're collecting taxes. Now the United States or the state is no longer no longer have the authority to lay and collect taxes when one of the human beings have actually effectively, through the proper means, have exempted the liability on the account. And this is shown through registration, giving the whole world public access to what's actually being done, so that this tax that they're trying to collect is no longer required. Is everyone following me so far? Somebody say something.
Following.
Say that again.
Following.
Okay. Now, when we get the clear picture of the taxation, we'll go back to the section where we're talking about. In a second, I'm gonna share the screen again. Share screen. Goes. We go to the Constitution. Wait, wrong. Going back to Article 4, Section 2, it says the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of the citizens in the several states. It says the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of the citizens in the several states. This is not trick. It's actually tricky. I'm going to be honest with you, so that you guys can get a clear picture of this. In the Constitution, let's make a point clear. Using capitalizations in the middle of a sentence where they normally don't apply indicates that it belongs to a term. It's a term. It's not just a word. It's also a term defined in some other writing, or it's people actually understand what that term is. You see the word citizen. You see citizen twice in here, and it's capitalized along with privileges and immunities. Because in this particular situation, citizens have a particular meaning, and it's termed. The privilege here is termed. The immunity here is termed. And I'm going to show you a couple words here to see the profound magic of this. It says the citizen of each state. It says citizen of the state. And when we look at this, we have to look at what the word of means. Of means belonging to. Belonging to, such as property. It says the citizen of each state. The citizen belonging to the state. I'm going to say it like that so you get a picture of it. It says the citizen belonging to the state shall be entitled to all privileges or exemptions. When you see what the privileges and immunities is, it says the citizen of each state, the citizen belonging to the state shall, that means may, it may and it may not be entitled to all exemptions of the citizens of the corporate fiction in. In is a legal word. The legal word in means in or under the laws of the several states. The several states is the 50 different territorial states, the 50 different territorial jurisdictions in the American states. I want to make that clear. The several states is the 50 different territorial jurisdictions in the American states. Okay, when we deal with the United States is it's a corporation that encompasses its jurisdiction within the United States, or the insulars or needful buildings within the within America. This is why when you go back here, you get United States of America. We live in the American states, and we have a corporation here called the United States. And the corporation of the United States, it functions. The United States functions in Washington, D.C. This is the United States. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, made by session of a particular state, and by the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislator of the state, in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So when we realize that in your particular state, I don't know what states you guys are in, but whatever particular state you are, the people have elected the state officials to actually have the sovereign authority there, which will wield the seal of the state. And then the United States comes in, and they have a duty to protect the states. And I can show you where they have to do that. It's Article 4, Section, just a second. Article 4, Section 4. It says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against an invasion. And the purpose of this is, you say, the United States shall guarantee to every state. When you see the United States shall guarantee to every state, here you're forming a liability. United States has a duty right here, and the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. So understanding what they're saying there is the United States has a duty here to the states. It doesn't say that the states shall guarantee to the United States anything. It shows that the United States has a duty to guarantee to the states a republican form of government. And if people don't understand what a republican form of government is, just remember, I'm going to have to go over that so that we could get a clear picture of this. So now, when we're looking at the citizen in means based on or under the laws of, based on or under the laws of the several states. Now we'll try to read this clearer. It says the citizen belonging to the state may be entitled to the exemption of the citizen in the several states, under the laws of the several states. When Congress when Congress exercises their authority that the people have granted them, and they tax your person, which subsequently is a citizen of the state. When your person is a citizen of the state, then there's citizens, and when you understand what of means belonging to. However, there are citizens in the state that don't belong to the state, but they're recognized in the state, meaning private entities that don't belong to or have their charter granted to them by the state. And when understanding the whole concept of citizen, and you have to realize that we're playing a game where the people are actually using pieces, like we'll use Congress. When you guys have elected Joe Biden or Donald Trump into office, whatever side of the political field or side that you decide to dwell on, you have to realize that you had the authority to put them in office by your vote. Well, if somebody's not holding your trust the way that you want them to hold your trust, including Congress, land and collecting taxes, you have the power to exempt, give the privilege and immunity, and place another citizen in one of the several states to have authority over your trust. Just a second. Okay, I want to go into the when understanding what a republic is. Because remember, the United States, they should have it says the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. Okay, when the United States has a duty, they have a duty to guarantee a republican form of government. We have to actually look at, and particularly, what this republican form of government is. And the best way to do that is looking at what a republic is. It's a system of government in which the people hold the sovereign power and elect representatives to exercise that power. Now, on the surface, a person would say, "Okay, well, we would just." I don't know how you guys perceive this, but you have to look at in detail on how this definition actually works. A system of government in which the people hold the sovereign power and elect representatives who exercise that power. And this is a profound statement, and it's funny how it actually works. Because any of you guys who's facing an indictment or a charging instrument or any other type of any other action, I want you guys to take into clear context that taxing is a sovereign issue. When you realize that you're one of the people, and the people we granted Congress the authority to lay and collect taxes, and they subsequently, through their necessary and proper clause, allowed police or the FBI or whatnot to do the laying and collecting taxes. But when what they do is when they actually give you a charging instrument with the state seal or the United States seal on it, or the charging instrument that's registered in the state, and they actually give it to you. Let's say that they indict you, for an example. If they indict you, they're going to give you a piece of paper with the state seal on it. Now, just imagine you with an indictment in your hand. It says that you did some dumbass shit. You did some dumbass shit. And it makes you real afraid. They pull a gun on you, or they came in and bum rushed your house, and they're going to steal everything in your house, and they give you a receipt for everything that they took out your house. But they're going to give you a charging instrument bearing the state. They're going to give you a charging instrument bearing the state's authority. Like the warrant or the indictment or the information that they give you, and And what happens is they're going to give it to you, and it's going to be in your possession. So now it says, what is a republic? It's a system of government in which the people hold the sovereign power and elect representatives to exercise that power. So when they give you the charging instrument, who's holding the sovereign power? You, as one of the people, you're holding the sovereign power that your state official or the United States, where the state or the United States, wherein they gave you the sovereign power and you're holding it. This is where all the power comes in, because what they've effectively done is when they take you into their custody, if they take you into their custody and they stole your car, they stole your by using intimidation or forces, wherein they make you feel guilty because of something that you apparently done. They're going to give you a receipt for everything that they took, or they should give you a receipt for everything that they took. And then they told you how bad you are. Well, there's probable cause that you stepped across the street, or you had a bullet, you had a gun, you jaywalked. And so when you're feeling guilty and they use such pressure, like they use a gun on you, what did I do? What did I do? Now you're failing to realize that these people are actually taking what belongs to you, that you have rights to. But what they're saying, they're exercising the sovereign power that the people has granted them by Constitution. So what they're saying is it's a system of government in which the people hold the sovereign power. And when they hand over to you the actual document with the state seal on it or the United States seal on it, and you have it in your possession, you are the people holding the sovereign power. And then the next section says, and elect representatives who exercise that power. Understanding what the taxing power is we gave Congress the power to lay and collect taxes, but we also gave citizens in the several states the power to exempt the taxation of the citizens of the state. That's also the power to tax, and the power to exempt tax is also dealing with the sovereign power. Now, understanding what this understanding the concept of representatives. Did they tax you? One would say to themselves, man, they're taxing me. They're taxing me. No, they're not taxing you. They're taxing a representative of yours. Now this is the concept. It's kind of clear when you look at it from a business standpoint. I have 3 nonprofit organizations plus my person itself. Which one am I? Am I my person? I'm not my person. Am I my nonprofit or any of my nonprofits? I'm not any of them. But my nonprofits and my person, they all represent my interests. When a vehicle that I drive is in my business name, I use it for business purposes. However, I am still able to enjoy the use of this vehicle that's in my business name because it represents my best interests. So now, in a situation in which a republic is a system of government in which the people hold the sovereign power and elect representatives to exercise, elect representatives who exercise that power. So now this is where people get confused. And when they give you that charging instrument, they give you the charging instrument because they hear that some of you guys may be facing indictments or whatnot. Then what they do, they use such humiliating ways on which they gave you this charging instrument. Now, what you're failing to understand is where the authority comes from. And when they bring you before a judge in a court of law that understands that they're dealing with representatives on that charging instrument, the judge is going to ask you a question. he'll ask a question. Did you receive a copy of that? And what the offender did, not the defendant, you're the offender because you offended their laws which don't apply to you. When you offended their laws that don't apply to you, they ask you a question. Did you receive a copy of that charging instrument? And when you apply yes, now in a court of law, guess what you bared witness to? That you holding the sovereign power. Prior to them giving you a copy of the charging instrument, they filed / registered a copy of that charging instrument in the public registry of the court clerk. They filed a copy of it and they gave you a filed copy of it, indicating that they registered their authority to lay and collect taxes. So on public record, since you're one of the people who actually created this government or this system, they actually put it on a piece of paper. They said, look, we're collecting taxes. We collected his boat. We took the house. We have all these things, and we have to give a return or a tax return to the people. So when the judge asks you, did you receive a copy of that? And then you say yes. Well, you being one of the people, holding the sovereign power because you have your copy there, because you're actually physically holding it. Now you have a authority to elect a representative to exercise that sovereign power. Well, here's what the problem is your inability or not knowing how to resolve a matter and dealing with our court system, which will preclude you from being able to resolve this matter, which is most effective in your best interest. Because now they've actually registered that they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is laying and collecting taxes. And when the judge, he looks at that charging instrument, and that charging instrument says that Jeffrey, he didn't shovel his snow. So therefore they charged the tax. And what they're doing is they're going to take his snowblower, his car, and everything else to cover that tax liability. And they're going to hold it in an account because they have a duty to collect taxes for the human being. And you being the human being in which they're holding their land and collecting taxes for, now you have a responsibility to put in place a completely separate trust or another representative who has the ability to exempt the tax liability, who could have that stuff, those items released. And if you fail to do so, they'll keep it until the tax liability is completely resolved. Just a second. This is 28 USC section 28. 28 USC section 3014. And this is the stay of disposition. This is dealing with taxes. By statute, Congress has legislated that certain things can be done through that statute, they could actually legally enforce the taking of goods and the taxing authority.
Hey, Tommy, can you repeat that code? It's not showing up on your screen.
Okay. It's 28 USC section 3014. This is under debt collection. This is under debt collections. we're looking at this. You remember what the privileges and immunities equaled. The privileges and immunities equaled in an exemption. The privileges and immunities equaled in an exemption. And what people are failing to understand is because here's something I have to point out. I've never in my life ever seen a winner. I've never in my life seen a winner that complained about the rules of the game or the outcome of the game in any fashion, because the rules of the game and the outcome of the game are always in the winner's best interest. And the reason why I'm saying that is if you find yourself complaining or or you find yourself negatively looking at how the system works, it's because you're probably a loser. And what I'm showing you is to be a winner, because when the state in the United States is done with everything that they're supposed to be, what they're doing, you are supposed to win, and you're not supposed to be losing it dealing with the state or the United States, because everything goes back to the people. So now, when we look at a stay at disposition, and we have to look at how this works, and this says from selling or otherwise disposing of the property for what such exemption is claimed until the court determines whether the debtor has a substantial non-exempt interest in such property. The United States may not take possession of, dispose of, sell, or otherwise interfere with the debtor's normal use. An enjoyment of an interest in property, United States knows or has reason to know is exempt. And I'm going to break this down to you. I'm going to break this down to you so that you guys can get a better understanding of how this works. By the charging instrument, like the indictment or the complaint or the warrant or any other negotiable instrument that they issued you. What it is by them entering that, they, like, if I don't know if you ever been arrested, but when they book you, they put you on the book. If you've been arrested, they put you on the books. They have this piece of property that they put on the books because slaves are property. And I'll justifiably show you that slaves are property. So what they do is an assertion of an exemption shall prevent the United States from selling or otherwise disposing of the property for what such exemption is claimed, until the court determines whether the debtor has a substantial non-exempt interest in such property. And what the court is going to do, he's going to do an examination. He's not going to do an examination of you. He's going to do an examination of what's on the record, what's filed in his courtroom with the court clerk. The court clerk's job is they're the recorder of deeds. They record deeds and titles to property and goods. So when you're able to ascertain what the court clerk's job is, their job is to record deeds, titles, judgments, orders. So when they give you an indictment, and an indictment says that, well, you had crack, you were speeding or whatnot. When you have crack or you're speeding or you have a gun and they say that it's unlawful, based upon that offense that they said that your person did, and there's a statute on there in which they use the tax. That identifies the taxing authority of the United States or the state. All right. And so you, as being one of the people, the exemption is inherent with you being one of the people. So now let's say an assertion of it, because your person, what is it? Like in my situation, my name is Tommy Crawford. They charged my person, Tommy Crawford, with an offense. They hauled me into the courtroom, and then they showed that the judge asked me, did I receive a copy of that, of the charging instrument? Said that I had crack or whatnot. So I'm sitting up here with it, and I'm an ignorant fool or whatnot, and I'm like, yeah, I received it, and I look at it and it says, well, I'm being honest, it says nigga had crack. Nigga had crack and he has to pay the penalty. Me being as dumb as I am, I ball it up and I throw it away. Man, because I don't, and I go straight to the law and I only look at the one page and pertaining to the me having crack page. And the fact is, I don't understand this is a negotiable instrument that they gave me. And when I go tell the judge, I did receive a copy of it, but I'm failing to understand what the whole concept of the exemption is. Did they have the authority to lay and collect taxes by all means necessary and proper? Yes. Do you guys want me in your neighborhood with some crack? No. So the people in your locality, they went to their legislator and they said, we'll stop people from having crack. And we'll pay you guys, the state, to stop people from having crack. So when they went to so what the state did is they said they created a statute wherein the taxpayers in your locality will pay on that statute that they created that prohibited people from having crack. So the taxpayers in that area will pay taxes to prevent people from having crack. So when they presented me, I'm in your locality with this instrument that says that I had crack. Now there's a tax liability there, and the state is going to tax the taxpayers for it. Subsequently, I'm a taxpayer as well. So in this situation, an assertion of an exemption shall prevent the United States from selling or otherwise disposing of the property for which such exemption is claimed until the court determines whether the debtor has a substantial non-exempt interest. By the time a person makes it into the court, now they already gave me a copy of the charging instrument. And then the judge looks at the record and it shows that, well, they charged me with having crack. And there's a penalty on there. The penalty is another word for the taxation. Well, it says, based upon the statute, if it's a felony or whatnot, there's a monetary charge or interest that the taxpayers have to pay on this obligation. So in Congress or the state, they have the authority to tax. And when the judge looks at the record and it shows that the statute in which they're using to lay and collect taxes, it shows that they have the authority to lay taxes. So based upon what the record shows, it says the state has the ability to tax. But now you have to take into consideration who has the authority to exempt taxes. We the people, we put Congress in the position to lay and collect taxes. And then we're supposed to understand the concept of registration. That exact same instrument that authorizes them to take your property, to take your goods, to take what belonged to you, that same instrument that's used to give them the authority to lay and collect taxes. And when the judge looks at the record and he sees that, he looks at that actual document and it says tax, because that's what it's saying by the statute. The statute's in play that allows the taxation. The taxpayers are going to pay for it. The court actually transmitted a copy of that to the Treasury Department to collect the interest from that obligation and to pay out on that actual obligation. But now, as long as that instrument in and of itself says to delay collect taxes, which Congress has the authority to do, or the legislator of your state has the authority to do, the court is going to impose a sentence to enforce that obligation based upon the fact that it clearly and unequivocally is authorizing the United States' taxing rights based upon the people granting Congress the authority to lay and collect taxes, right? But now, here's the thing. Did Congress do their job? Yes, they did. They did everything. They did everything that they were supposed to do in that matter. They did everything that they're. Just a second. Okay, Congress did everything that they're supposed to do. Did they lay and collect taxes like they're supposed to? They stopped me from having crack. They put me in prison. They're turning me into a slave. Did they do what they're supposed to do? Yes. Congress is doing what they're supposed to do by all means necessary. But now, and then they filed it on the record so that the whole world knows that, hey, I'm doing my job. I'm doing my job. And they're given an account for where the property or the goods that they stole or that they took into their possession are located. And then when the judge asked the question, me being one of the people, and did you receive a copy of this? And I said yes. So now I'm holding the sovereign power. The sovereign power is to tax or to exempt the tax. So now it's my job as being one of the people who put Congress in the position to lay and collect taxes. It's my job to take that same instrument and take it to the court clerk, which is the recorder of deeds. And I have to put a big fat word on there, exempt from levy. Levy means to lay and collect taxes. By me applying my exemption, because I am one of the people in which Congress is laying and collecting taxes for, by me applying my exemption on that particular obligation and registering it with the court clerk before the proceeding starts, hopefully before the proceeding starts, because now before the judge makes his determination, now he'll be able to look on the record and he'll see my exemption of the liability in which their authority to lay and collect taxes is already demonstrated. So now we're going to look at it from what it says. An assertion of an exemption. Can your artificial person, can he exempt taxes? No, he's a person that lives and dwells on paper. So it has to be actually done by a human being, one of the people. An assertion of an exemption shall prevent the United States from selling or otherwise disposing of the property for which such exemption is claimed until the court determines whether the debtor has a substantial non-exempt interest in such property. Well, how is the court going to make that determination? And I just mentioned it. The court is going to make a determination by looking at public record. The actual charging instrument in and of itself says tax. But once you register it with the court clerk, once you register it or file it with the court clerk that says exempt, because the corporation can't do it, only a human being can do it. And when a human being does it, when a human being puts it on it, therefore it becomes exempt. Now, when it becomes exempt, now the United States cannot sell or otherwise dispose of the property, right? So now we're going to go into the second sentence right here. It says the United States may not take possession of, dispose of, sell, or otherwise interfere with the debtor's normal use and enjoyment of an interest in property the United States knows or has reason to know is exempt. Now, this sentence here is, okay, we have to talk about instruments or securities or piece of or titles. Let's say that you have a title to a car, or you have a title to a car, and you look at these. You have to look at it from is a title to a car a piece of property? Of course, a title to a car is a piece of property. Let's say that you have a title to your car in your pocket, and you have a title to your car in your pocket, and then you have the car. The car is. You have to ask yourself a question in this matter. Which is more important, the title to the car or the actual car? I hope you say that the title to the car is, because whoever holds the title to the car or owns the title to the car actually has rights to the car. Who gets to control the car, ownership of the car. So now, let's say that you have a title to a car, and for some reason you actually signed it, but it's in your pocket, and I come up and rob you. You have cash in your pocket, and you have a radio in your pocket or a phone in your pocket, and then you have the title to the car. So then I take your money, I take your phone, and then I take your title. All of these things are on your person. They're all on your possession, and these are all property that belongs to you. The phone belongs to you; it's your property. The money that's on you, that's your property. And then the title to the car is also your property. So let's say that, so if I took all of these items from you, then I've actually effectively taken your property, even the title to the car, right? Even though the title to the car, you're not really going to feel the effect of it based upon the fact that you could go get a replacement one, but it's still in effect your property. But this particular piece of property has an interest that's associated with it. And as I mentioned, it's a title to a car. So the interest that's associated with this particular piece of property is in fact the car. The car itself is the interest that's associated or attached to the particular piece of property. So now, and when we read this section here, we'll see, hopefully we'll get a clearer picture of it. It says the United States may not take possession of, dispose of, sell, or otherwise interfere with the debtor's normal use and enjoyment of an interest in property. Now, interest in property, what is the property? The title. The property in and of itself is the title. When they gave you the charging instrument or the title to the property is, well, the actual title is property, and the interest is the actual the item that's associated with the particular title or the deed or the receipt. If you have a receipt in your pocket, and then I take your receipt, if I take your receipt or whatnot, whatever the receipt for is the interest that's associated with the property. So in this situation, when you've accepted and given value to the goods that they have seized, you've accepted it and you've exempted it. You exempted it by registering the actual obligation or the security. By registering the obligation or security, that in and of itself indicates that the registered piece of paper that you put back on the record that indicates what your property rights are. And now you're entitled to enjoy the interest that's associated with the title. So now, does anybody get what I'm just said? Or if you didn't get it, I'll explain it to where you could get it. United States may not take possession of, dispose of, or otherwise interfere with the debtor's normal use and enjoyment of an interest in property. It didn't say property now, it says the interest in property, because the interest is what you're looking for, because the property, you have it registered. Subsequently, in this matter, it's the title or the paperwork. But what you're demanding to be released is the interest that's in the property, because now you registered ownership of your property with the state or the United States. And this is talking what the United States may not take possession of: your house, your car, your clothes. The United States may not take possession of, dispose of, sell, or otherwise interfere with the debtor's normal use. Who is the debtor? Debtor in this matter is your person, because the house, car, home, all of these things are registered in his name. Like I myself personally, to protect, for asset protection purposes, I will not put a car in my name. I will not put even though my person is not me, I still will not put a car or anything in my name for asset protection reasons, because the liability falls away from me based upon the fact that I put it in another entity's name. So in this situation, the United States may not take possession of, dispose of, or otherwise interfere with the debtor, your person, normal use, and enjoyment of an interest in property. The United States knows or has reason to know is exempt. So we're going to go back to, we look at this sentence here. We gave Congress the power to do what? Lay and collect taxes. Are they going to do it by all means necessary and proper? Yes, they're going to lay and collect taxes, but it's the duty of the people to exempt their liability. You have a duty to exempt their tax liability based upon the fact that they're going to exercise, they're going to do what they're supposed to do, and they're going to tax. Because guess what they have? They have a tax liability. This is. This is 28 USC section 960. We'll just look at the first part of this in A. It says any officer and agent conducting any business under the authority of the United States court shall be subject to all federal, state, and local taxes applicable to such business to the same extent as if it were conducted by an individual or corporation. Because this heading of this is tax liability. 28 USC section 960. Any officer or agent conducting any business under the authority of the United States court shall be subject to all federal, state, and local taxes applicable to such business to the same extent as if it were conducted by an individual or corporation. Now you have to ask yourself a question: who has the tax authority? Who has the tax liability? They have the tax liability. I'm being honest, I've never seen nowhere in law where it says the people have a tax liability whatsoever. There's nowhere in the world have I ever seen that people have a tax liability. But I could prove in law right here that they have a tax liability. Do you have anything you could offer them when they're landing collecting taxes? See, because they have a duty. They have a duty to land collect taxes. Do you have something that you could offer them? Surely you could offer them your exemption. By offering them your exemption, hold on a second, just a second. Since they have a tax liability, it says a freedom from duty, liability, or other requirements. Well, since they all have to lay and collect taxes, if you exempt their tax liability, you give them a freedom from their duty, their liability, and other requirements. You've subsequently got rid of their tax liability. It's a privilege given to a judgment debtor by law, allowing the debtor to retain certain property without liability. I could go into more in depth in here, because once they enter a judgment against you, they become a judgment debtor by law, because they're going to hold your property. Now they're obligated to hold your property for X amount of years, whether it's your slave or whatnot. This is a privilege given to a judgment debtor by law, allowing the debtor to retain certain property without liability. Once you exempt their liability, now the debtor, your person, can retain certain property without liability. If you exempt their liability, the judgment debtor, there's a difference between a judgment debtor and the debtor. It says a privilege given to a judgment debtor, meaning them, because they have a duty to lay and collect taxes. They're a debtor, allowing the debtor, your person, to retain property without liability. And this is why it's important for you to take into account and exempt the liability on their account. By doing so, now you can free up their books, because when they take care of your property, or whatnot, they're going to bill you for it. They're going to bill you for it. So as they bill you for it, they can reduce their tax liability. Look, we kept them in a cage. We did such and such. We did this. So each time for accounting purpose on each fiscal year, they'll justify why they taxed, where the expenses went to. So when we understand the whole concept of taxation, and we realize, wait, Wait, I have the power to exempt the tax liability. And remember, please remember this, an exemption creates a credit offsetting tax liability. An exemption creates a credit offsetting tax liability. Tax, we'll look up a word here. Well, the word is tax credit. Somebody got a question?
Yeah, hey, it's not showing your the stuff that you're looking up, like the definitions, it's not showing.
What was the last thing that it showed?
It's been a minute since it showed anything. It's like your camera's off or something.
Okay, hold on a second. Do you see a screen?
It's black.
Snap, hold on a second. Just a second.
All right, we'll see you now.
Did you guys see the exemption or tax credit? You didn't see any of that.
Didn't see none of that.
Okay, hold on a second. If you guys don't see what if by chance you don't see what I'm showing you, please let me know. Did you guys see 960? USC?
They didn't see none of that.
Hold on a second. We're going to. Do you see the screen now?
Yes.
I sincerely apologize for the. This is 28 USC section 960. Any officer and agent conducting any business under the authority of the United States courts shall be subject to all federal, state, and local taxes applicable to such business to the same extent as if it were conducted by an individual or corporation. Okay, and as I stated, there's nowhere in law it says that the people have a tax liability. And the reason why this is because the people are the ones who actually authorize the taxing authority. The people hold the taxing authority. Okay, so now if by chance the screen goes off, let me know. Okay, so now we'll look at what this says here about a tax credit. Hold on a second, we'll go back to exemption real fast. An exemption, a freedom from a duty, liability, or other requirement. An exception. Okay, a freedom from duty, liability, or other requirement. An exception. When these actors acting under the authority of a court order or whatnot, they are taxing, and they're doing it under a court order. Well, if you having the authority to exempt their tax liability through your privileges and immunity clause, now they are no longer doing it. They no longer are taxing, or they no longer have the taxing authority because you've exempted them from their tax liability. And it's when you assert it through registration of that particular obligation that the judge has to look at. Now, you could actually, at this point, you could go tell the judge, look at docket number 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever, in which you registered that actual obligation. And you tell the judge in open court or whatnot, no, this obligation, this particular property is exempt. And then you have the law under 28 USC section 3014, or is that D or whatnot? in that section, you could tell him, no, this is exempt. And then when he looks at that particular document, which normally says tax, which he's going to impose a tax because it's on the public record indicating tax. But now he sees this exemption. Now he sees that the United States is free from the duty on land and collecting taxes, right? So now when we understand what the freedom from a duty, liability, or other requirements, right? We'll go here and we'll look at a tax credit. Tax credit. Okay, because we're going to look at a concept on how you're entitled to collect money now, and we have to understand how this works, how this whole concept of taxation works. It says a tax credit. What is a tax credit? It's an amount subtracted directly from one's total tax liability, comma, dollar for dollar, as opposed to a deduction from gross income, often shortened to credit. Who has the tax liability? They do. Any officer or agent conducting any business under the authority of the courts. And they're going to, and bless you, they're going to collect taxes from every corporation out there, because this is what it's designed for, because corporations are incorporated in the framework of the state or the United States. And so it says an amount subtracted directly from one's tax liability, dollar for dollar. So now let's say the United States, they say that, well, you know, this fool had crack, or he embezzled $10. If you exempt their tax liability for that $10, $100, $1 million, if you exempt their tax liability, it'll be for what? Dollar for dollar, as opposed to a deduction from the gross income. And when we look at what it says there, it says often shortened to credit, right? Well, we'll look at what a credit, because it's often shortened to credit. Well, in this situation, we start realizing that they have a tax liability. If I exempt their tax liability, I gave them a tax credit. So then we'll look at this word here, because of credit. Okay, we'll bypass one, belief or trust, or we'll bypass this one. It says one, ability to borrow money, on the faith on one's ability to pay debt. Okay. We'll look at the time to some. We'll go to the just a second. Belief, trust, ability to borrow money, faith. Okay, I'll try to explain this whole credit. One's ability to borrow money, faith, and one's ability to pay debts. At the time of the funds used by a financial institution under a letter of credit. Okay, now we'll look. Now we'll look at how this credit thing works. The credit, when the United States, they seized a person's property in order that they could give the people their tax refund. They technically borrowed your stuff. Therefore, you're the one who credited them based upon the fact that they borrowed your stuff in order to give you, the people, a tax refund. If you exempt their liability, you create the credit, you identify that you're the one who actually gave the credit, which would equal you being the you'd be the creditor. Because if you exempt their tax liability, because they have a duty to lay and collect taxes, one to whom a debt is owed, one who gives a credit, a tax credit for money or goods. I want you guys to understand how this works. If you exempt their tax liability, you become their creditor, because now their tax liability is gone, and now you become their creditor because you got rid of a debt that they owe. Who was the debt owed to subsequently? The debt was subsequently owed to you. Now, when you start realizing this, when you put your exemption, I know that sometimes when we're dealing with this exemption thing, we can't see the benefit of it. We can't see it because we're so used to paying with money. But then again, the system has created a way where we use practical applications of this exemption, or we use practical applications of how this works on a day-to-day basis, to the point where we're supposed to know how this stuff is actually works, especially the fact that we are the people. This concept comes through, and I've explained this over and over again to multiple people. For an example of a coupon. A coupon is a security as well. We have like 3 people here. We have 3 people that want to go to McDonald's and they want to get a meal. Jeff, I'm gonna use Jeff as an example. Jeff worked hard. He worked very, very, very hard. And what he did is he took some of the Federal Reserve notes that he got out of his pocket from working hard, and he went up to the counter with McDonald's. He goes up to the counter with McDonald's, and what he says, I'd like to buy a Big Mac. And since he purchased the Big Mac, when he purchased the Big Mac, they gave him the Big Mac. He got what he paid for. I looked at Jeff and I said, wow, this fool. I looked on my phone and I have a coupon through my app, my McDonald's app. Since McDonald's offered a coupon on the McDonald's app, what I did, I gave my phone screen to the person, and they click, they zap, they hit it with the register indicator, and based upon this app saying that I get a free Big Mac, I got a Big Mac, and the question I'd have to ask one is, did I pay for the Big Mac? Now, I didn't work hard like Jeff did. But nonetheless, I did in fact pay for the Big Mac. But the means in which I paid for the Big Mac was through a coupon, something that McDonald's has written in its books or in its bylaws that indicate that I am entitled to leave with a Big Mac. They put it's written in there, and therefore they are obligated to give me what I paid for through the coupon. It's written in law, the McDonald's bylaws. So then there's a guy on here. His name is Napoleon Redmond, or his name is Napoleon, and he comes in here. He's a tough guy. He comes up to the register and he says, "Motherfucker, give me a Big Mac. Damn it, I'm not paying for it." Now here's the problem. Now Jeff, he paid with cash. I paid with a coupon. And here's this other guy. He comes in here, Napoleon. He comes in here, and guess what he says? "Give me a Big Mac." And they say, "No, you didn't pay for it." And then if he tries to take it, he goes to jail for robbery because he's failing to pay. So the question, in understanding this concept, when you could actually understand this concept, and when you understand this concept of how the coupon kicked in, did I pay? Yes, I paid. Did Jeff pay? Of course he paid. But this guy who's refusing to pay but demanding something, he doesn't get what he's expecting based upon the fact that he is in denial of you having the responsibility to pay. So when we look at the American people, you have workers, people that work extremely hard every day. They work extremely hard every day. So when they get Federal Reserve notes or however they get paid, and then what they do is they purchase what they want. with their cash. But then you have to realize, wait, there's the elite, the people that understand where the taxing authority comes from. And then they actually understand what that privileges and immunities clause equals. That privileges and immunities clause is our Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution is actually the bylaws or the coupons. It's an actual paper coupon in which that a person could actually pay for any of the liability that they have or to cover the liability, exempting the United States or corporations from their tax liability. And so you have to ask the question, did you pay? Of course. But how you paid is a different situation. But the fact that the exemption feels as if it feels as if you did not pay because you didn't work for it. But no, it's written in the law from the initial onset of how the taxation comes from in the first place. And when you start understanding that, then you would be more inclined to use your exemption. I'll go get a traffic citation that indicates, hey, you were speeding. They get me with the speeding. Hey, you were speeding. And what they expected, they expect me to feel guilty because I was moving faster than some other individuals on the road, right? And since they're since the system is so used to people paying a certain way, like, oh, feeling guilty for what they did, I was just moving faster than everybody else. I wasn't a threat because I wouldn't do that because I don't want to be a threat to other people, but I was just moving faster. So they gave me a citation. They said I was moving faster than other people. But what the cop actually did is what he tried to do is plant the seed of guilt. You were speeding. You were doing 30 miles in a 10 mile per hour in an area. All the while, guess what he's going to give me? He's going to give me a negotiable instrument with his ability to tax. So now while my mind is filled with this whole delusion of me speeding, and I hope he doesn't do such and such wrong to me. So then he's going to be like, to settle this, you go take this to court, or you get a court date or whatnot to settle this. And if I go to court, they're going to demand that I give $200 for speeding in a 30 mile per hour zone, right? But when it's all said and done, it didn't stop the fact that I was speeding. I was speeding. It's true enough. You can't stop that fact. The speeding was there. So when the speeding was there, the only thing left is to resolve the financial aspect of this charging instrument. When the cop had been an officer of the state, or the state having the authority to lay and collect taxes by grant by the people, then here I come in, and guess what I do? I exempt his tax liability. That same $200 bill that he gave me, I returned it, I exempted it, and if there's any interest that accrued from that particular obligation, as the creditor of that account, I'm the one to whom the debt is owed. I'm the one who gave the credit for the goods. For the money or goods. See, because the taxes are supposed to be returned to me, the people. Please understand that that's what the whole concept of taxation is. I know there's a lot of people that talk about, I don't know what avenue you guys are going on with the gold standard. We talk about the gold standard. That's a common thing. Some people, when they start understanding how corrupt the government seems, or how corrupt the government is, right? They talk about, and they got rid of the gold. They got rid of gold. Oh, that's crazy. They got rid of gold, right? And now the gold standard is no longer here. There's nothing backing up the gold. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Please tell me that this is still coming through here.
Yeah, we see it. You're good.
Okay. Now, you guys are the first white people I've done this class with, where The majority of the people are white. I'm gonna be honest with you. And this is a sensitive topic to some people, but I'm gonna hear. I want to make it clear how this works. We have to touch on the topic of slavery, and I'm going to touch on the topic of slavery because it's in the framework of every state constitution. It's in the framework of the United States Constitution, and we have to realize how this works. Okay, it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude. Now you see that comma there? There's a comma because what in between the two commas, there's this thing called a clause, I'm gonna say it's a catch. Okay, the fact that it's a catch, we're gonna read it without that catch first. It says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. It says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Wow, that's a profound statement there. That said, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. When a person hears that, dang, all the slave owners back in the day, it was like, damn, we can no longer own slaves. Back in the day, prior to the enactment of this amendment, everybody used to have these things called certificates of slavery or a slavery certificate, right? When they owned their slaves, they had a thing said, look, I own Jeff. Today I'm owning a white man. This is a great day. I'm gonna use you, Jeff. You're my slave today. What I had a certificate that said I own Jeff. And if on that piece of paper, his ens legis, his corporate fiction, and what happens is I would walk around. I have him in the back of my paddy wagon or my wagon or whatnot, and my papers indicated that I own that dude there, that guy. And the cop pulled, and an officer of the law, he pulled us over, and I said, yeah, I own that fool. I'm gonna call him a nigga. John's a nigger right now. I mean, Jeff's a nigger right now. I was like, that's my nigger back there. And based upon the fact that I had the paperwork that said that I owned that nigger, and then the cop asked me, what's your name, boy? He asked Jeff, what's his name? And he said, is this you? And Jeff said, yeah. So now I have the lawful paperwork from the state of Mississippi or whatever state we're in that said I have the rightful owners of that piece of property. And then since Jeff acknowledged, or he had my brand on him or whatnot that says he's my property, now I was entitled to do whatever with my property I wanted to do with my property. Does that make sense? Because it says neither slavery nor involuntary, right here it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And this right here was where they prohibited the actual free slave trade or issuing of slave certificates. Slave certificates or certificates of slavery. Okay. Now, when they did that, they created a situation wherein they made it appear like slavery was no longer going to exist. But that's a damn lie, because slavery is always going to exist, because slavery is a good thing if you're a slave owner. And I'm going to prove this. So now what they said is not. So you remember we bypassed the clause. So it says they didn't get rid of slavery. They just created a clause. This is what the clause said. And it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, here's the catch, except as punishment for a crime whereof a party shall have been duly convicted. So now they used to issue certificates of slavery. They used to issue the actual paper that said certificate of slavery in the state of Mississippi, in the state of Minnesota, in the state of whatnot. They used to actually issue certificates of slavery, but now since what they're going to do is they're going to make it appear as if they're getting rid of slavery, but that's far from the truth, because slavery is a very profitable means to, it's very profitable in one way or the other. So what they said is, except as for punishment of a crime whereof a party shall have been duly convicted. So now what happens is, so now I used to have a certificate saying that said I own Jeff, and all of a sudden now and we'll look at the 14th Amendment for a small second, because now we're going to talk about once they apparently made it appear as if they freed slaves. Once they made it appear as if they freed slaves, which they did actually freed slaves from the certificates of slavery, because they prohibited those titles. But they said, except as punishment for a crime whereof a party shall have been duly convicted. And notice how they say a party. A corporation could be a party to a lawsuit. Like McDonald's or any other corporation, it's a party to a lawsuit. So if they convict a corporation or artificial person who doesn't have all the privileges and immunities clause of the Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution, now remember that person, that artificial person, doesn't have the privileges and immunities clause. But now, you remember, we're going to go to the 14th Amendment real fast. It says all persons born or naturalized in the United States. Now you see that comma there? And subject to the jurisdiction thereof, which means there's a catch. Not all persons born or naturalized in or under the laws of the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But if you are subject to the jurisdiction thereof by not having the privileges and immunities clause of Article 4, Section 2, by registration in the state, then you are a citizen of the United States and the state wherein you reside. There's a catch to it. Understand there's a catch. They put that catch there, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So not all persons that are born in the United States or naturalized in the United States, not all of them are subject to the jurisdiction, meaning the American people that actually exercise the ability to use sovereign power to protect their persons. Now they become immune from the jurisdiction of the United States and the state wherein they reside. It says no state shall make or you remember I pointed out that in the middle of a sentence, when they use capitalization of certain words, they're termed, like when they use the privileges and immunities clause of Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution. But that's inherent with the people holding and using the sovereign power and electing the state to exercise that sovereign power through the state seal. But now we're going to look deeper into the 14th Amendment right after they freed the niggas. They freed the niggas from the certificates of slavery. So now right after they did this, now they created a whole nother class of person, because except, going back to the 13th Amendment, except as punishment for a crime whereof a party shall have been duly convicted. So now what it says here is no state shall make or enforce any law which will abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizen of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. So now, you remember in Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution, they used, when they talked about the citizen, they used the capital C in citizen, it's capital, because they're talking about the state citizen in the several states and the citizen of the state. But now here, when the United States prohibited, when they said, well, we're not going to issue certificates of slavery anymore, and then they said, and we're not going to issue certificates of slavery anymore, but then they said, they put the clause in here, said, except as punishment for a crime. Then they go into the 14th Amendment and they put a new law in here, said, no state shall make or enforce any law which will abridge the privileges. This is a different privilege or immunity of the citizen of the United States. So now, once they freed the slaves, once they freed the black people here that were once slaves, now they granted them this thing called United States citizenship, right? And so, but the whole phrase behind this is, well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to start making laws. They're going to start making laws for these old they used to be slaves. They're going to start saying that you have to have a privilege to walk on my street, and if you violate it, now you have to be punished for the crime on violating this, because now they're subject to because now we're going back to they're subject to the jurisdiction because he's a citizen of the United States and the state wherein he resides. If you're to notice, there's a big difference between the privileges and immunities clause of Article 4, Section 2, and then your privilege. You know how they say you have a privilege to drive is a privilege. Well, that's granted to a citizen of the United States, or that's granted to that's a as they say this, they're saying, look, hey, we the American people will grant you niggas the ability to drive, but it's subject to you have to pay us for it, like having a driver's license or the fees that's associated with everything that comes along with getting our permission. So now we'll grant you that privilege in this situation. So when you start understanding slavery is real, so to enforce the 13th Amendment, they had to create the 13th. To enforce the 13th Amendment, they had to create the 14th Amendment, authorizing the states to create a bunch of free slave laws, free niggas laws. I want you to understand that, so that they could put them back into slavery. So if you're to understand that concept, that's exactly what was done. So they now all of a sudden, if you go look at a white woman or whatnot, here they could put you on the chain gang. And then as the country started doing bad, but the United States is the one who's owning all of these freed slaves because they became citizens of the United States. The United States gave them food stamps and stuff. Now here you have, now all of a sudden you find yourself having poor white trash. This is what's considered. You have poor white trash that they realize that the United States is treating these freed slaves a certain way, even though they're locking them up or they're putting them back in the slavery or whatnot. What it starts to get confusing to them. It's like, wow, they get all these benefits coming along with being citizens of the United States. So then they subsequently start falling in line, and they signed up to be citizens of the United States as well. By them signing up to be citizens of the United States, well, then they were able to start getting the business as well. If you sign up to be a citizen of the United States, well, you have to deal with the same repercussions of being a citizen of the United States, such as the laws that they started creating under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which applied in all of the states. So now here to this very day, back in, if you look at your old cowboy movies, if these white cowboys, if they got caught if they shot somebody or whatnot, they'll take them to jail. And then once they adjudicated that they've done it and they made a public nuisance, they'll give them their gun back and they'll go about their business. Because back then they actually understood the concept of them having the ability or the rights to bear arms, because that's a constitutional grant guaranteed by the Second Amendment of the Constitution. But when they start applying laws that apply to the runaway or the newly freed slaves, now they can prohibit this new slave who probably still want to kill his old slave master. They start creating laws to prohibit him from having a gun. So that law didn't apply to the white man who actually had the right to bear arms. But when he decided to become a citizen of the United States, they started applying those same laws to whoever decided to be a citizen of the United States. And please understand where I'm going with that. So when you start understanding your position and on the slave trade, and so now we have to go back into understanding, is the slave trade real? Of course it's real. And then we'll understand they used to issue certificates of slavery. They no longer do that. Just a second. They no longer issue certificates of slavery. So we have to look at, and the reason why I was talking about slavery is because we were talking about the gold standard. Now, I have to ask some white people this, and you could be completely honest. I pray that you're honest, but I pray that you're honest. So anybody white, to be honest, without causing human hardship or injury, would you own slaves? Please, somebody answer that question.
I would not.
Then I'm gonna be honest. You're what is considered a fool.
Oh, great.
See, I'm a black guy, so you're sitting up here saying, it sounds good. It sounds good to say that you wouldn't own slaves because because I'm a black guy, right? But the truth is, if you could have somebody cut your grass, mow your lawn, do all these other sorts of things, and they can't back talk, and they had to be able to do it completely under your control, then you would do it. Any wise man would do that. And talking to men, if you had an opportunity, I don't know. Okay, I'm not a white woman. I'm not a white man, so I don't know. But let's say that I'll say Kim Kardashian, for an example. If I actually had the ability to force her into a situation where she was submissive to me, there's a good chance that I probably would do that. I'm not saying I would be very malicious at it, but if the situation of slavery came about and it came into my, and I was actually able to do it, I would actually take part in that. And anybody that's being honest would do that. Anybody that's actually, I'm not saying being mean, because we don't have to be mean to be a slave owner, technically, because the whole concept of slavery is actually there. You just have to understand that it's just a part of life. So now let me ask you a question. So now we're going to come to the conclusion that owning slaves it's acceptable and it's cool, right? You have to get that understanding in mind that slavery is actually a good thing. If you're what? A slave owner. Okay? When you get the concept that being a slave owner is a good thing, which would you rather have? An ounce of gold or 2 hardworking slaves? Somebody has to answer that. Which would you rather have? An ounce of gold or 2 hardworking slaves? What did you say?
2 hardworking slaves.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. Do you get what I'm saying? Because like let's say you're on a deserted island or whatnot, and you're on a deserted island, and all of a sudden, well, you got your ounce of gold. It might be valued at $1 billion, but you're on a deserted island. I'd rather have 2 slaves that would do anything I tell them to do because their value is way more than that ounce of gold that's just sitting there shining. Do you see that concept there? So when we talk about the gold standard, because some people they argue, man, we need to get the gold standard back. Why? That doesn't make any sense when the United States is directly in the business of slave trading, trapping and trading of slaves. Which would you rather have? A certificate, a gold certificate, or a slave certificate? I myself personally would rather have a slave certificate because I could do more with slaves. So when we're able to ascertain that the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, it's kind of like a ploy. It's kind of, no, I wouldn't say ploy. It's a disguise to do something that was actually, it was kind of sinister, but it was sinister, but at the same time, it's necessary. Do you want? I even asked Black people that's in my community. Do you want certain individuals in your neighborhood toting guns, selling drugs, or robbing and things of this nature? Well, the government actually created a necessary evil to eliminate individuals that do unsavory things in our community. So now we have to understand the whole concept of slavery or imprisonment. It says the situation in which a person has absolute power over the life, fortune, and liberty of another. Okay, the second one, the practice of keeping an individual in such a state of bondage or servitude. I'm going to say it again. The practice of keeping an individual in such a state of bondage or servitude. We're not talking about beating them and all of this other stuff. We're just saying keeping them in bondage or servitude. And what in this situation, this is what considered slavery. Now, in this section here, this is the Constitution. This is dealing with slavery from the Black's Law Dictionary, and we're going to look at what we're going to read down here in the footnotes, because this is the powerful stuff here. So when you start realizing that, hey, we're really going to engage in this slave trade thing seriously and tough, because it's a constitutional grant, right? Slavery was a big problem for the Constitution makers. Those who profited by it insisted on protecting it. That's slavery. They insisted on protecting it. Those who loathed it dreaded even more the prospect that to insist the abolition would mean that the Constitution would die a born. Some people don't understand what that means, so I'll explain that. I like slavery. I think it's great. And what's your name that said you didn't want slavery initially? What's your name? I'm going to use you as an example.
Sybil.
Okay, Sybil. Sybil doesn't like slavery. Well, she doesn't own Kim Kardashian, though. I like owning Kim. You get what I'm saying? And I make profit from Kunta. Kim and Kunta, I make profit from them. They're my amusement. But since Sybil here with her self-righteous self and ignorant to the fact that, hey, I'm just smarter than you. But what we're going to do is here, and so, but you, Sybil, you need me to help ratify this Constitution so that we could unite this party. But Sybil, if you try to stop me from owning my slaves, I love Kim. If you try to stop me from doing this, I'm not going to sign up on this contract with you. I'm not going to sign this compact. I'm not going to come up with this agreement. Fuck it, we're going to go to war. We're going to keep on going to war, civil wars and whatnot, because there's an agreement, because I'm not going to give up my slave. But now here's Sybil, check this out. So I'm willing to compromise somehow. I'm willing to compromise somehow so that we could get this contract, because I think the contract or the Constitution would be right for us. But one thing we can't do is get rid of the slave trade. So now what it says is, what does it say? Those who loathed it dreaded even more the prospect to insist the abolition would mean the Constitution would die aborted. So the framers reached a compromise of sorts. The word slave and slavery would not be mentioned. So we're not going to talk about. We're going to create the 13th Amendment to make it appear like this shit's not really going on, right? But the Constitution would safeguard the peculiar institution from the abolitionists. So Sybil, you're shit out of luck, because we're going to keep the slave trade. We're just not going to call it the slave trade no more.
Okay, I can stay in my lane.
You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
So all y'all gone now, because we're going to create the 14th Amendment. We're going to put all you niggas back into slavery, one way or the other. And since you poor white trash, you guys are sitting up here going against the grain, because I'm profiting from it. I like this stuff. We're going to put you in that same category with the niggas. Poor white trash niggas, y'all could go in the same boat, because we're going to create a situation where we'll make all you motherfuckers citizens of the United States. Okay? So now, once we're able to ascertain that the word slavery and slave and slavery would not be mentioned, but the Constitution would safeguard the peculiar institution from the abolitionists. So now we're able to really understand that, hey, they never got rid of slavery. I have to promote that they never, ever got rid of slavery. And I'm going to say it again. They never, ever got rid of slavery. But now what I'm saying, and then we'll go back here, and Sybil, you have to realize that slavery is a good thing if you're a slave owner, which slave ownership is a civil right because slaves are considered property. As we go in here and we read more, we'll go down here. We'll go past just a little section. I hope you guys follow it. It says, although the substance of slavery has varied from place to place and over time, systems of slavery include most or all of the following conditions. So now we have to understand how slave trade actually works. It says most or all of the following conditions. And the key factor in every situation, slaves are what? Slaves are property. Slaves are property. And property can be sold, traded, given away, bequeathed, inherited, or exchanged for other things of value. I'm a side note. You remember that Congress or the state or the United States, they have ability to lay and collect taxes. They have the ability to lay and collect taxes. Well, then it was based upon this thing called the gold standard. I'm going to go back into this one. But I want you to understand this. They used to issue gold certificates, and they used to be backed by gold. But now they got rid of the gold standard. But now the Constitution clearly indicates that the slave trade is fully in existence. Well, they're going to get rid of these certificates of slavery. But the only way you could be a slave is if you're duly convicted. So instead of issuing a certificate of slavery now, what they'll issue is a judgment in a criminal case. Once they adjudicate that a person / party has been convicted of a crime, now he is subject to slavery. Now he becomes a part of the state. As he becomes a part of the state, he's become a part of their tax registry of all of the indicating all of the stuff that they have in their possession. Now, Sybil, what happens is they caught somebody doing something wrong, and you're the one who you're supposed to profit from it. They don't have gold and silver to give you. But guess what they do? They go give you a title to me. See, they can't give you their tax refund in gold and silver because they got rid of the gold and silver certificates. The gold standard is no longer there. But now, in this situation, guess what they give you? They can't give you a certificate of slavery. Why? Because that doesn't sound right. But if they issue you a judgment in a criminal case, which substitutes the certificate of slavery, it acts and functions just like a certificate of slavery. And then in and of itself, gives you your tax refund because it entitles you to the goods, the property that's associated with the actual certificate or the actual judgment. Once a judge adjudicates that this person committed an offense, now they certify that he committed an offense. He stared at the white woman. Which is a crime in Mississippi. Now then they gave you the title to me, and now I got to go on your plantation, your prison, because that's a crime. When you understand that concept, then you because you're supposed to profit from it, you're a slave owner, and the taxpayers are going to have to pay on that account there. So we're going to look deeper into this. Slaves are property and can be sold, traded, given away, bequeathed, or inherited, or exchanged for other things of value. Like, since they don't have gold certificates to give you or silver certificates because they got rid of the gold standard, they'll go give you a title to a slave. The status of a slave is inherited, usually through the mother. Here we get your birth certificates. Here you got a welfare recipient. Obviously, she's a citizen of the United States because she doesn't know how to take care of herself or People don't know how to take care of themselves for whatever reason. So then when she's born, she go register. She puts into the registry of the Department of Human or Department of Commerce. I would say in this situation, she registers her kid there. In some situations, they separate the mother from the father. So all we really need now is just the mother. Some cases the father, but now the slave is registered into the. He's registered into the what is it? It's usually through the mother. Okay. Now we're gonna go to 3. The formal step, the formal legal situation or informal agreement regulates the capture and return of fugitive slaves. So now, if they go catch you with a bullet or catch you, taking $10 or whatnot, now they're going to go get the marshals, which are slave trappers and traders. The police, they're slave trappers and traders. They're trapper and traders. This is what they're animal control as well. So what they do, they have a system that's designed to go trap and trade these people. They do an NCIC check, or they do the Bureau of Apprehension. They got different avenues on trapping and trading these things. Okay, it says a structure and agreement on regulating the capture and return of fugitive slaves. Slaves have limited or no legal right or protections. So if you go in here and you're talking about, if you come in as a slave and you sit up here and talk about what your rights and stuff are, obviously you're going to be ignored because you don't have any legal rights or protections. Okay, it says slaves may be punished by their owners or their agents with minimal to no legal limitations. Slaves, I'm going to read it again. Slaves may be punished by their owners or their agents or their agents with minimal to no legal limitations. Okay. Now, I want you to understand that a master and an owner are not the same thing. An owner could be a master, but an owner is an owner who has the rights to the slave. For an example, Sybil, since you don't want to get involved in the actual slave maintenance thing here, you just want to own a slave, because I'm gonna make you an owner of the slave right here. What happens is you're gonna have the title or the paperwork to the slave, but you hire me to be the slave's master. And so when I go deal with these slaves, because this is what I do for a living or a hobby, I actually work for you, the owner. But now when I go tell these guys, Jeff and these guys, I say, hey, go do this and do that, and I'm gonna do something bad to you. So now I become your agent. I want you to understand how that works. The slave may be punished by the slave owner or their agents, meaning me, the master. Okay? With minimal to no legal limitations. Right? Masters, number 6, masters may treat or mistreat slaves as they wish. Because, Sybil, in order to maintain your ownership of this slave or this person that has to go through a mental dehumanizing factor, I have to do certain things to this individual to put him in a state of servitude, make him manageable. So now I'm going to do some weird things to this person to put him in a situation, like making him lift up his hands, putting a gun to his head, bending over, spreading his cheeks, her cheeks, open up his mouth, running his finger through his mouth, and all weird type of stuff. These are dehumanizing factors which transfer a human being into to a mental state of subhuman, putting him in a smelly bandwagon or a paddy wagon with a bunch of other lowlifes or drug addicts. So now the master may treat or mistreat slaves as they wish. Okay? Although some societies require that masters treat slaves humanely. And some societies ban murder and extreme barbaric forms of punishment and torture. So now, to this day and age, if now taking into consideration what's happening, Sybil, if you go catch an indictment, right? What they're going to do is they're going to humiliate you. They can't just actually just rape you now because some societies have, they banned this stuff. But what they're going to do is they're going to put you in the cuffs in front of everybody, the walk of shame. As you leave your neighborhood in cuffs with your hands, they're going to put your head in the back there, and they're going to put you in this hot, sweaty thing, and then they're going to bring you down to the courthouse or the jail. They're going to book you. They're going to say, "What's your social security number?" Making sure that you're a citizen of the United States. By them registering this, so now they booked the slave, and somebody issued a certificate said that Sybil, she stole a plate from Walmart. Somebody certified that. So now, since there was an offense that was committed, which is a crime, since the offense was committed, they certified the crime was committed. Therefore, now Sybil is subject to slavery. She's already been found guilty by the person who certified this. They certified that she committed the offense simply by putting it on a piece of paper, because this class of person doesn't have all the legal rights of a human being. They don't have all the rights because then they're going to, once they book her and they, by that affidavit that somebody certified that she stole the plate, and then they're going to say that they're going to give the certificate of that slave ownership, that charging instrument. They're going to give it to Sybil, the human being, and they're going to say, "This chick is so damn stupid. She is so damn stupid. She don't know that she has a title. She has the title. She has the title to the goods that this document covers." So now this is why back in the day they made sure that it was illegal for Black people to read, and because all of a sudden they were able to actually understand, hey, this is some bullshit. But now people don't. White people, Black people, no one reads the law. They just go off assumptions. People actually go so much off of assumptions of what they think they know the law is, or they go off what attorneys say the law is, that they don't actually look in the law to determine what's in their best interest. But I want to go back here into the slavery. So they treat them humane or whatnot, or whatnot. We're going to go to 7. Masters have unlimited rights to sexual activity with their slaves. But going back to the beginning part, not all of these things are in effect right now, but in some areas they have and back in the day they used to have unlimited sexual rights with them. And we're going to say slaves have very limited to no appeal to formal legal institution. Wait, hold on a second. Slaves have very limited to no appeal to formal legal institutions. If you guys go to prison, and you find that, if you realize what the obstacles that they're going to create for you to actually get yourself out of that situation, you'll realize exactly what that means there. Because once you're in the system, like the prisons and stuff, they'll tamper with your mail, they'll stop your correspondence, they'll do all different types of things to eliminate you from being able to get yourself out of such a state. So this is why it's important to handle your matters prior to this, and understanding the situation, how the slave trade actually works. Where we're at? Slaves have unlimited. Okay, we're going to go to 9. Slaves are not allowed to give testimony against their masters, or usually other free people. And in general, their testimony is not given the same weight as a free person. So understand this: you better take care of your case before you go in, before that judgment is entered, that court order, that judgment entered adjudicating that a person is a slave or a person is a criminal. Because all of a sudden now your testimony might waver in its ability to move to have its effectiveness. The mobility of slaves is limited by the owner and often by the state. Now, our prison system is a profound situation, because the state property, once a slave, if no one ever claims the slave that's in their possession, and you notice how they say it here, is limited. The mobility of a slave is limited by the owners and often the state. If no one ever claims a slave as being a slave owner, now it's going to be limited to the state, because the state is the one that's responsible for all the slaves now, because they're the ones issuing the certificates of title or the judgments in criminal cases. And if no one comes and claims the slave, now the state is going to make sure that he stays in his little kennel in prison. But I want you to understand there, it says limited by the owner and the state. When you start realizing, wait, who the hell is this owner? When we start realizing that a judgment in a criminal case is replacing a certificate of slavery, we're realizing that a judgment in a criminal case is replacing a certificate of slavery. Now we have to realize, if you're a previous slave owner and you understood the scam that is going down on how we're going to do this, well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to register ownership of that judgment, and I will go back and show you the law on this. You register ownership of that judgment to identify yourself as a owner. But here, you, Sybil, let's say that you got you a case and you never register ownership. Well, who's gonna be in possession on public record or have ownership of your property? The state. Because the state has the ability to control your mobility based upon the fact that no owner ever came in and claimed the goods, because that's what slaves are. What does it say? Now here's 11. Owners are able to make slaves into free persons through a formal process a formal legal process, manumission. But often these freed persons are not given full legal rights. This is important for you guys to realize what they're saying here. It says, owners are able to make slaves into free persons through a formal legal process, manumission, but often these freed persons are not given full legal rights. Okay. So now we have to ask ourselves the question, who can free slaves? Well, it makes it abundantly clear right here that the slave owner can. So this is why it's important for you, Sybil. This is why it's important for you to understand that slavery is good if you're the slave owner. Because as the slave owner, you have the ability, you have a right to make the slave free. You have a right to retain, you have the ability, because you hold title to the slave, to dictate what happens with the slave. But while since you hate slavery so much, you're not understanding the legal ramifications of the whole institution of slavery, the whole concept of slavery. You're in denial. Black people, like black people in Sybil, what you guys say is slavery is bad. Slavery is bad. And you're so against it, but guess what? This stuff is going to be practiced anyways. So instead of going against it, learn how the process actually works. Because what it clearly states there, that the slave, what does it say? Number 11, owners are able to make slaves into free persons through the formal legal process, manumission. Okay, and that's a point that I want to make. So if my brother was a slave, damn it, I hate slavery. Damn it, I hate slavery so bad. I hate slavery. I could bitch and moan about me hating slavery, but my brother's a slave. Or guess what I could do? I could go to Jeff. I say, Jeff, you have the title to my brother. How much does he owe? How much would you sell him for? He says, yeah, give me $500 for the nigga. Oh, okay, I'll go give him $500. No, so I'll go give Jeff $500 for the title to my brother. Who paid for it? I did. I registered ownership of my brother. Now, guess what the state's going to do? They're going to recognize my ownership interest in my brother. Even though he's my brother legally, I have title to him because I registered ownership of him. Now, as the owner, I could abuse my brother because I have title to him. Just how Jeff was able to abuse my brother, put him in the field, and work him to death, put him in a cage, lock him behind bars and this other stuff. But now in this particular situation, since I purchased my brother, I have the right to do that. But you remember what it says. The owner are able to make slaves into free persons. So since this is my brother and I love my brother, I have the ability to free him. But if I'm not an owner, I don't have that ability to do that. Because I'm not in accordance with the law when I'm denying the fact that slavery actually exists. Slavery is real. They issue slave certificates daily. They process people. They process them through the system all day long. You go to we don't just sit in courtroom and look at how silly these fools look when they sit up here and plead guilty to these weird crimes that they do. Some people, I'm being honest, some people need to be locked away because of the horrific or horrendous actions that they've done, and the mental illness that they had done, and the threat to society that they are. I have to admit that. But since Sybil was speeding, and all of a sudden they said that she has to do 10 years in prison behind that, say, wait a second, we have to change how this works here. Sybil has to be smart enough to understand exactly what the state's doing. And then by doing so, on one hand, they called Sybil, the corporate fiction, a speeding nigger. That's what they call Sybil, the corporate fiction. And then they backdoored her because she's an abolitionist with all this weird stuff. They backdoored her. They gave her a title to her. Said, look, here's a title to this. Here's a title to Sybil, this corporate fiction. Sybil look at it. Wait, that's me. Man, I was speeding. Now her brain is messed up thinking about her speeding and what they're going to do to her or something like that. But the cops, because they're all law enforcement officers, because we're really enforcing the law here. The cops, they know the law. They know the law that we're in the business of what? Slave trading, trapping and trading. So now when that woman, that human being, that woman who has intelligence, and she understands that this is the slave trade, and the state just offered her tax refund, her tax return, but she better register her property as being exempt in order that they have to release it, because her exemption will create a credit offsetting the tax liability on the account. So when the judge looks at the book, he can issue an order releasing the property that is subject to that negotiable instrument. We're going to look, okay, we just read 11. What does they say? Number 12, slave ownership is supported by laws, regulations, courts, and legislation. Imagine that. We live in America and we deny the concept of slavery, but slavery is real, and it's a good thing if what? You're a slave owner and you understand the concept of slave ownership. Now, I'm pretty sure everybody on this class here, we've all owned a car. A car has value. So in order to secure my interest in this car, what am I going to do? I'm going to register it with the state so that the whole world knows that car that I'm driving belongs to me or my corporate fiction, right? So the state knows it. Everybody knows it, because if you look on public record, if the police pull it over, they're going to see that property belongs to me. So now, I'm not saying everybody owns houses, but most people, they should be owning houses. So now, whose house is this? Well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to record a deed, because this house has value. They record it with the state. So the state secures their value because guess what? The state has goons that are law enforcement officers that's protecting a person's rights to that house, that are protecting their rights to that car. But here you have these slaves. Slaves are just like cars. Slaves are just like houses. So in order for me to protect my rights, guess what I have to do? I have to take and register my property, just like I did a house, just like I did a car. And since the courthouse is where in criminal court it's a special court. If you were to go to any other court, everything is very plain and simple. He owes me, and the court settles the case. But in criminal court, it's the only court where the defendant doesn't want nothing in return except he's denying everything, because it's a special process wherein they're creating slaves to sell to who, or to barter to who? The American people. I want you to understand how they work that. Okay, slave owners are able to. Okay, we did 11. Slave ownership is supported by laws, regulations, courts, legislature. Excuse me, including provision. Okay, what did it say? Legislator, including provisions for special courts and punishment for slaves. How many of you guys heard of the FDA? We've all heard of the FDA, right?
Yes.
Okay, the FDA, they make sure that these businesses, they make sure that the businesses are making sure that the food is right and wholesome for the people. They make sure that the food is right and wholesome for the people. Are you mad at the FDA for that? No, you're not mad at them, because that's what their job is. Because the people say, hey, we want you guys to regulate the manufacturing of our food. I don't know what the people that makes cars, there's companies that regulate how cars are manufactured to ensure that the people's cars are functioning properly for the manufacturing of cars. There's a regulation for the manufacturing of clothing, right? There's a process in which all of these things are done to ensure that the people get their property and they're satisfied with it. Well, we're talking about a peculiar situation here. It's called slaves. Just like that car, just like that food. Once you purchase that car or you purchase that food, you have the government guarantee on that it was processed a certain way. Well, slaves are this similar process, but it's called criminal procedure, or the criminal process. It's a dirty job. It's a dirty thing, but it's the same process as what the FDA does. They have to condition an individual to become into a state of servitude. And so in criminal law, it is in fact that process. Now, are you mad at the FDA? No. Are you mad at the manufacturer of car, the government regulations on cars? No. So now, if they're going to process you some slaves, guess what? You shouldn't get mad at them for processing slaves, because guess what? It's a constitutional grant that we, the American people, we allow the slave trade. But when it's all said and done, if I purchase that slave, if I purchase that house, if I purchase that food, and have a receipt for that house, now I'm entitled to the goods that I have receipt for, that I purchased, that I acquired. So, when they give you that indictment, guess what they're going to say? They're going to say, "Look, Sybil, they're going to talk about the defendant. They're going to talk about the defendant. So you should talk about the defendant too, because one thing you are not is the defendant. The defendant is the slave." Yeah. Okay, I'll give you an example of how this works from an animal standpoint of animal control. Right here, Jeff, because it's a more masculine situation in this situation. And I'm not saying that Sybil can't, she can't wrestle alligators, but Jeff, you're more inclined to control alligators. You have a $3,000 valued in alligator, an alligator that's valued at $3,000, right? All of a sudden, then you have a place where a little moat or something or some where you keep these alligators. One day, all of a sudden, this alligator, and he's earmarked with your number on it because you have it registered with the state to indicate that since it has value that you want everybody to know that this is your alligator, right? So all of a sudden, one day your alligator somehow broke out the fence and now he's in the local neighborhood. Oh boy, Jeff's alligator is loose. They don't know who Jeff is. There's numbers here. So guess what somebody does? They call the police. They call animal control. We got a wild alligator out here. He's threatening public safety. Come get him. Animal control rounds up. They hog tie him. They hog tie him and put him in the back of the paddy wagon. Look at his earmark. They book him and they put him in the back of the paddy wagon. And then they look at their earmark and they look up the public registry. The public registry indicates that this alligator belongs to Jeff. As the alligator belongs to Jeff, guess what they're going to do? They're going to notify Jeff. Hey, look, we had to come out here and grab your alligator. We had to grab your alligator. And then in the process of grabbing your alligator, what happened is we billed you. Now, us being the state through animal control, now we have an interest in your property valued at $200. In order for us to release our interest in your alligator, you have to give us $200. Or else we're going to give you 90 days to come get your alligator because we're going to start charging storage fees for taking care of your alligator. Now, Jeff has some options here. Jeff could leave his alligator that created an offense called escaping and becoming a public nuisance because he escaped accidentally. He didn't know any better. The fence wasn't locked in. It wasn't locked in correctly. So now what happens is Jeff has to make a conscious decision. Do I leave my property there? They'll keep my property. They're not going to force me to pay them. But if I don't pay them, I'm going to lose my alligator. So now what Jeff does, he looks at the values and he says, you know what, I'm gonna go get my slave. He issues them a negotiable instrument which credits their books. He gives them $200 cash. If he had a coupon, guess what he would have probably gave him? A coupon. But in this situation, he gives them $200 cash. And then guess what they do? They give him his release papers, and he leaves with his alligator because he is the one who is the rightful owner and manager of his alligator. They did not release that alligator by himself, but they released the alligator to the owner. Now, did Jeff argue the validity of their capturing of his animal? No, his alligator escaped. The alligator committed an offense. Since the alligator committed an offense of escaping out of Jeff's home or out of his alligator farm, he's not going to dispute that. The fact is that the alligator was out there. Animal control proved beyond a reasonable doubt that that alligator committed that offense, and he took care of the obligation. So now they took care of the obligation to give them their $200, and the case was settled. What I don't know what you call this gator or whatnot. Crocky, you bad boy. He scolded the Crocky, you bad boy. But it didn't stop he still paid. And it didn't stop the fact that the alligator escaped. So the fact is, once he gave him the payment, now the alligator was released to him but they would not release the alligator to the public again because it's a public nuisance. But once the owner came in, who had public record, who was a public record, who had the majority of ownership interest in the actual animal there, and then he paid for the release of the state's interest in that animal, then he had full ownership of his goods again. So it's easy to see that when it comes from when it comes from a ownership of an animal aspect. But here we're talking about slaves here. On one hand, they're treating you like this is why they use your person. Your person is less than a human being. It doesn't have all the human rights. Your person is the animal. When the human being comes in here, you're like, well, we're not going to argue about if he escaped or not. That's some dumbass shit. Because the truth is, guess what? He escaped. But let's settle this matter. Here, you could use my exemption. We'll create a credit. We'll offset the liability on the account of this case, and you can release my property. Whether it's Sybil the corporation, the assets of Sybil the corporation, whether it's the animal, whether it's the house, car, because your exemption creates a credit offsetting their tax liability. Thus, you become their creditor, entitling you to the goods, the services that you paid for, because your exemption creates a credit equaling your paying. What does it say? 12. Slave ownership is supported by law, regulation, courts, legislature, or including provisions for special courts and punishment of slaves. So in the process of creating slaves, they have to create criminal law, because this is the only means in which they create these creatures or these individuals that's in such a state of bondage. What does it say? Slave provisions for the courts for it said I'm gonna read 12 again because I didn't finish reading it. Slave ownership is supported by law, regulation, courts, legislature, including provisions for special courts and punishment for slaves, provisions for the capture and returning of fugitive slaves. What is it? What was the name of that show? America's Most Wanted. It was a great show when I was a kid. Great show. We all used to catch all your criminals on America's Most Wanted. How the sheriffs and the marshals would come through. They'd come through and they would go catch all of these fugitives. The whole time, I never knew that this was slave trapping and trading. But in all actuality, that's exactly what it is. And you have to remember that they created laws and legislation for this stuff, and provisions and rules for the regulation of the sale of slaves. Wow. They created a provision and rules for the regulation of the sale of slaves. We tend to be in denial here, and I want you guys to understand that. We tend to be in denial here because we're not going to call that person a slave because black folks can't stand slavery, and you sympathetic white folks, you're ashamed of your past. The sympathetic white folks and the angry blacks, you're ashamed of the past, and we don't want to deal with it. So we're going to sweep it under the rug. All the while the intelligent individuals who understand the financial aspect and the ability to profit from it, they continue to make sure it flourishes. This is why in America, in our country, slavery is in America has the most people in prison than anywhere in the world per capita, because it's such a great business. And how do they work it? They get the taxpayers to pay for it. I'm gonna show you some basic science of how it works. They create the charging instrument. We'll say one felony, and understand how the charging instrument works. It's one felony of if at a later time I can show you the laws on how they work this. If they say a felony it creates the offense is worth $500,000. So the charging instrument in and of itself is a $500,000 bill.
Give me the, send me the code. Hold on, wait.
Please get on mute, please. The statute, in this particular situation, the statute in and of itself says that it's a $500,000 charge. If they catch an individual committing an offense, it's a $500,000 charge. So the actual instrument in and of itself is a $500,000 bill that's registered in the court's registry. The court's registry transmits that same particular piece of paper to the Treasury Department, and the Treasury Department creates a credit on the court's books. As the taxpayers pay the interest on that obligation through the statute at 6% per annum. Now we could actually figure out the dollar amount of the value of that obligation. If the obligation that they register on their books is $500,000, and then they transmit it to the Treasury Department, the Treasury Department has to kick out interest at 6%. As they kick it out for 6% on $500,000 at 6% per annum per year, that's $30,000. Okay, for each felony. So if they charge you with an offense that's a felony and it's a $500,000 charging instrument, it's a $500,000 charging instrument, the taxpayers have to pay $30,000 a year to the holder of that obligation. Subsequently, the defendant or the defendant or the slave or whatnot, they authorize the BOP or the DOC, depending on which if it's federal or state, they authorize them to be the holder of that obligation, which entitles them to collect the interest on that obligation, because the one who's holding it doesn't know any better. But whoever is holding that obligation is in fact entitled to the interest that accrued from that actual obligation. Because at being a holder, you're entitled to that. So now when we look at them giving an obligation out here, you're like, hey, wait a second. If I hold this obligation and I'm the owner of this obligation by registration, if I register ownership of this, not only am I entitled to get the goods and make him a free person, I'm also entitled to collect the interest that the taxpayers have to pay on this obligation. Black people can completely argue about this 40 acres and this mule. As they keep on charging us with as they keep on continually charging us with these offenses, if we realize the whole concept of registration and ownership of these obligations, would be entitled to a substantial amount of money, like $30,000 a month in interest, if we actually look at and use the law in a more productive way. What does it say? 12, I'm going to say laws, provisions, and capture and the return of fugitive slaves, and the provisions and rules for the regulation of the sale of slaves. See, the whole time when you're dealing with this criminal, he's sitting in the county jail and he's not understanding what's actually going on here. He's just he really doesn't want to go to prison. But his attorney, which is a slave trapper and trader, I want you guys to see this because you guys tend to. A lot of people sit up here and they go to these attorneys. And these attorneys are scam artists. They're real live slave traders. They're not going to tell you that they're slave traders because it's not cool to say that, but this is exactly what they are. The first definition of an attorney: strictly one who is designated to transact business for another. A legal agent. They're officers of the court. I'm going to say it again: strictly one who is designated to transact business for another. A legal agent. Officer of the court. One who is charged with upholding the law and administering the judicial system. Typically, officer of the court refers to a judge, a clerk, a bailiff, a sheriff, or the like. But the term also applies to a lawyer who is obligated to obey the court's rules and who owes duty of candor to the court. Now, and try to make this short. A judge is a master who works for the owner. I'm going to say this again. A judge is a master who works for the owner. Look up what it says. We go master. Look up master so we can get what a master is. Someone who has a personal authority over another service, especially a principal who employed another to perform one or more service, and who controls and has the right to control the physical conduct of the other and the performance of the service. Okay, so that's what a master is, right? So we'll look at number 2. A parajudicial officer, such as a referee, auditor, an examiner, or assessor, specially appointed to help a court with its proceedings. I want you to understand what there's, and all of those aspects, you have to look at what a judge is. A judge is a master. He's a referee. He's an auditor. He's an examiner. He assesses the offense, and he looks at the title. He looks at the title to the slave when dealing with this situation. But when we're going back to what the whole purpose of it is, he's a master and he works for the owner. We're going to look up legal owner because legal owner is more correct. One recognized by law as having the owner of something, especially one who holds the legal title to property for the benefit of another. And when we talk about legal title and understanding how your person actually works, there's 2 different types of person. There's the natural person, meaning the human being. Then there's the artificial person. Another term for artificial person is a legal person, because this person, he lives on paper. Okay, but I want you to see this first. It says, one recognized by law as the owner of something, especially one who holds legal title. It doesn't say title, it says legal title to property for the benefit of another. So now my car is in one of my business names, right? Since it's in one of my business names, who holds the legal title? My artificial person does, my legal person, right? And it's for whose benefit? It's for my benefit. I'm for the other person. I'm the beneficiary for my legal person holding title. Legal person, it says, when you go to legal person here, it says it goes to artificial person. And we went back to artificial person. An entity, such as a corporation, created by law and given certain legal rights and duties of a human being. So now, since somebody could be extremely slow and the system doesn't mind you being slow because that's your right to be slow. So when they say, what name would you like it in, sir? And then I go put it in when I go put it in my person's name, Tommy Crawford. When I put it in my person's name, now Tommy Crawford is this legal person he's an artificial person holding legal title to my property. But I could also put it in another legal person's name, and then he'll hold legal title to my property because he's a legal person. He holds legal title for my benefit. I hope you guys following that so far. Okay. Just a second. Go back. Okay, I hope you guys can pull up. I want to pull up a law here. The question came about your rights. When you start realizing that they're using legal entities to engage in business, when that's the only way our legal system works is using legal entities. The people use legal entities to facilitate what we want done in our system. Is it still on the screen?
Yes, we could see it.
Okay. I'm going to go up here to I'm going to go up here to rights of good faith transferee and obligee. Good faith, transfer rights to good faith transferee or obligee. This is dealing with your rights. This is 28 USC section 3307. We're going to go to 3307D. Now we're going to talk about rights because this could sound kind of funny at times, but you're going to realize what your rights are. It says, okay, there's certain things in law that I have to give you an understanding on. When the use of the word in most statutory usage in words, the word shall and may indicate, shall means may or may not, the word shall. But when you see the word is, that's inclusive of that it's a definite. Like when talking about murder, talking about having a gun, it shall be unlawful for a person who is convicted of a crime to do such and such, right? It says it shall. That means it may be unlawful, which is civil or criminal, for a person, which means probably in that aspect a corporation. So they took it and they made it sound like they're talking about human beings, but in all actuality, they're saying it may be a civil offense for a corporation to do something. So they created a situation for a person who's never looked at the law to have an assumption that they've done something that was very wrong. But in all actuality, they didn't really do anything wrong at all. But now, when it's something is definite, such as a right, they're not going to say shall. They're going to say is. And so in this particular situation, we're going to talk about a right, the right of a good faith transferee or obligee, right? Notwithstanding the voidability of a transfer or obligation under this subchapter, which is about debt collections. This whole section is about debt collections. A good faith transferee or obligee, once they transfer or they give you the obligation of the state or the United States in this situation, it says a good faith transferee or obligee, once you get it in your possession, that obligation that the judge asked you, did you receive this? You said, did you receive this? A copy of this? And you said, yes. What says a good faith transferee or obligee is entitled to the extent of the value given the debtor. Who's the debtor? You remember the United States or the states, they have a duty to do what? Lay and collect taxes. Here they are the debtor. If you exempt their tax liability that they want to claim, if you exempt their tax liability, you've given them value. To the extent of value given the debtor for the transfer or obligation, that negotiable instrument they gave you, that they're putting on the public registry saying, look, this individual owes this money. They're putting it on public record. But if you exempted the liability, the good faith transferee or the obligee, you the natural person, the surety, the one who's in control of that account, you're the one who they gave it to you. The judge, they transferred it to you. They said you're responsible for this obligation that belongs to the state or the United States. But now what they're saying is the obligee, you is entitled to the extent of, by exempting it, to a lien on or right to retain any of the interest in the asset transferred. You have a right to retain a lien on or right to retain any interest in the asset transferred. Now, some people might not understand that exactly how. Hey, what is he talking about? But when you look at it from a standpoint that we've actually accepted the fact that slavery is good, is 100% good, and that the system is going to engage in this stuff. The system is going to engage in slavery. And the only one who could free a slave is who? A slave owner. So once the state, who has the right, because the constitutional grant allows them the authority to trap and trade slaves, and then they go give you, one of the people, because they're trying to give you your tax refund. They're not going to give you gold and silver. They're not going to give you a gold and silver certificate because it's not backed by anything. But what they're going to give you, they're going to give you a title to a fresh slave that they a fresh title that they made. So once you applied your exemption to this account, and then you look at this indictment in it, it authorizes the holder of this account, the holder of this obligation here, to retain any of the interests in the asset transferred. Would you consider this title to a slave the interest to the asset? Wouldn't you consider correctly? Would you consider this obligation an asset? Of course. If I have a deed to a house, that's an asset because it's on the books. I could show my accountant, I could show anybody else, hey, I got this title, I got this deed. If I have a title to a car, I have a title to these cars. They can look it up on public record that I'm the last owner of these vehicles. So now this is the asset. And the interest that's associated with this asset subsequently is the house, the car. But since we're playing this game about slave trading, that judgment, that indictment, which entitles the state to hold a slave and trap and trade this nigga. So now we're in a situation. Now that becomes the interest. So now what it's saying, it says the obligee, the human being, is entitled to a lien on. You could put it in your corporation's name, another corporation's name, or a right to retain any interest in the asset transfer. You have a right to do that. What's another right? You have a right to enforce the obligation incurred. As the owner of the property, or the slave, you remember my older brother, you remember I purchased the title to my older brother who, I think it was Jeff. I think Jeff owned my brother, and I gave him the $500 for my brother, and I registered ownership of my brother. Once I registered ownership of the title to my brother, now I'm entitled to enforce the obligation of my brother's servitude that's incurred in the state of Mississippi. That's me because I'm the owner. This is why it's important to become the owner, the one who accepts responsibility. Once you accept responsibility, then all of a sudden now you get give me my nigga, give me my slave. This is my shit. Give me what's belonging to me. I don't give a damn what he did. I have the right to retain the interest in the asset transfer. I use an exemption to defray your tax liability. Now I'm entitled to retain the interest in the asset transfer. Now, if I so choose to make my brother go pick cotton, that's a right for me. That's a right that's inherently belonging to me as the owner, as the one who fulfill my obligation to exempt your liability through the value I've given you. Now, bear in mind, you see the or the reduction in the amount of liability on the judgment, because that judgment is in fact the obligation in which that person, that slave, is held liable under that obligation. He is a slave under that judgment. But as the owner, I have an ability to reduce the amount of liability under judgment. So now, if Sybil, you might be an attractive woman, and guess what I might do? I might keep you in bondage because how this thing goes, However, but when I have title to my brother, and I love my brother, he gets on my nerves sometimes. But now that I have title to my brother, I can reduce the amount of liability on the judgment. And what we're looking at is right here. This is the actual law. I hope you guys can see that this is the law right here when they're indicating what the rights are. So now when you deal with the court system, when you start looking at these obligations or these securities that they give you, then you'll be able to see exactly what they're dealing with. Perhaps at a later time, because it's now 3:00, but perhaps at a later time I could show you in depth about other laws that's relevant into how this process actually works, because they really detail the regulation of the slave trade. They don't hide it. They really put it in the book. But people tend, since we shy away from the actual concept, we're in denial of the actual existence or the enforcement of it. But when someone asks the question about the enforcement, this is where the enforcement is. When you accept that obligation that they give you, and now you apply your exemption through registration, now you're entitled to dictate what goes on here. And this is under judicial, what is it? This is under 28 USC section 3307. And this is, and I could go in depth about how the taxation works, your right to collect the interest and everything, but it is 3:00 though. If you have my email, you guys can probably send me some general questions and I'll answer them. Does somebody have a quick question they want to ask?
I got a question.
Okay.
Just want to know if you could just, when you go ahead and you said apply the exemption, if you could give us the verbiage that would go, let's just say on a charging instrument, that'd be great.
Exempt from levy. The exempt from levy. Levy means taxation. We're going to go back to the Constitution. When we go back, you remember what I showed you the section where it says exempt? It says an assertion of an exemption shall prevent the United States from selling or otherwise disposing of what such the property for what such exemption is claimed. You don't have to get real in detail about it, but when you start realizing what Congress has the authority to do, lay and collect taxes, levy taxes. We went over the definition of tax. Tax is it's a imposition imposed by the government on persons, properties, enjoyment of the people, person, property, transaction, and enjoyment of the people to yield public revenue. But once you register, you file that property as being exempt. Now they can release it because the exemption created a credit. When you say exempt from levy, that's exempt from taxation. On that same instrument, what you would want to do is you'd put your name on it, because now who exempted this liability? Who's the creditor of this account? Who's the creditor of this account? So now when the judge looks at the record and it shows that Jeff, Sybil, Tommy, whoever did it, now they have an ownership interest. They have an ownership interest in the actual obligation. Just a second. I'm gonna go into a section here. Just a second. Watch this. Just a second. This section here, what they do here is they're all monies paid into the court of the United States or received by the officer thereof in any case pending or adjudicated in such court shall be forthwith deposited with the treasurer of the United States or a designated depository in the name and to the credit of such courts. Science behind this is because courts are the registration places that indicate what obligations or monies that's owed. It goes into the registry of the court, and the court transmits it to the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department creates a credit on the court's books. They monetize the charging instrument. Now, when a person doesn't understand what money is, if you're to look at what money is a medium of exchange authorized or adapted by a government as part of its currency. A currency is a medium of exchange. Now, when we start realizing what the United States and the states have the ability to do, they have the ability to slave trade. So what they do is they issue certificates of slavery as their mediums of exchange. So it's not, the taxes that they're collecting is not necessarily monetized, but what happens is when they go trap and trade a slave, what they do is they register it with the court. And since it's received by the officer thereof, in such cases pending or adjudicated, and it shall forthwith be deposited with the Treasury of the United States or a designated depository. Then when it gets there, they monetize it and they put it as a credit to the court, right? Now, if your name is actually on that obligation, you, the natural person, the human being, if your name is on that obligation, or even if your signature applies on that obligation. Now watch what they're saying here, because you have to remember that they're actually doing this for you. But if you out of your ignorance, you allow somebody else to be your payee, they will administer your money to you. Like sitting in prison, if you're sitting in prison, they will administer your money to you because you authorized it. But read this next section. This section shall not prevent the delivery of such money to the rightful owners upon security. The actual obligation with the court is a security, according to the agreement of the parties, under the direction of the court. See, if you register ownership of it, you're entitled to the money that's credited on the books of the court. And in this section here, you have a right to withdraw the money that in this section here, 28 USC section 2042, you're entitled to collect the interest that you're entitled to withdraw the money that's deposited in the account, that interest. But it's past 3 o'clock. I have to go. But if you guys have you were going to say something?
Oh yeah. Hey Tommy, this is Jeff. Hey, can we book another call with you to go in more depth with how to process these remedies? If it's court or if it's like a tax bill, or I think you're just getting to the meat of that, and then time's up. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Can we do it before like Sunday, like sometime this week?
What time would be better for you guys?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll poll everybody and see what we can do.
Okay.
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
How's
All right.
that?
I hope you guys found it educational, and I can definitely get more in depth into the law. See, because I pray that you guys understand that when you go into a courtroom, or deal with the law enforcement, they are in fact law enforcement officers. And so the only way that you could really combat them is if you could actually look at the law, understand what the law is saying, and you apply this to them. Their whole goal is they're gonna fact you to death. They're gonna fact you to death and have you all paranoid and all kind of stuff. Oh, you were speeding. You're speeding. Oh, now you're feeling guilty. So now you're gonna try to deny the fact that you're speeding. But let's get into the law where this is all about business. Well, if I was speeding, you created this obligation. I could show you in the law that they say they can dispose of the charged offense. They can dispose of it. You go tell the court to dispose of the charged offense, and we can move on here. Let's deal with the real issue at hand here. I'll forfeit my money that you owe me if you dispose of the charged offense. Or else, if you don't dispose of the charged offense, give me my money. And then I'll show you that you have the rights to it. But we could go get into that later time. I do have to go take care of some family issues.
Absolutely. All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Great info.
Okay. Contact me, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, sir.
No problem.
All right. Bye-bye.